Hello, everybody. My name is David Whelan. I'm the CEO of VR Education. I'd first off like to thank Mario for inviting me to talk here at the Atlantic Education Summit. It is a great honor. And today we're going to talk about how virtual reality is being used in education in the past, in the present, and how I see it being used in the future. We're going to look at a couple of different areas. So we're going to look at how virtual reality is being used for younger kids of, say, K-12. We're also going to see how virtual reality is being used for training in the corporate space. And we're also going to view how virtual reality is being used in some high-end training, such as medical training. Now, a lot of you might be surprised to know that virtual reality is not a new platform whatsoever. It's not a new technology. It's been used for over 50 years in various different forms. And here we can actually see one of the very early VR wearable headsets. This was a very, very heavy device that was strapped to the ceiling to take the brunt of the weight. And then you would walk around. You can actually see it there on the right-hand side. The headset is actually connected to the ceiling. It was a very, very heavy device. This was 50 years ago. And back in the 80s, NASA have been using virtual reality to train astronauts. It's a lot easier to put an astronaut into a virtual reality simulator, train them how to, say, do maintenance on a spacecraft instead of sending them up to orbit. Or actually, it's very laborious as well when you're putting astronauts in the tank, if you've ever seen these big water tanks and they float in them. This is actually a much safer way of providing training, high-quality training to astronauts. Also, the US military have been using virtual reality for quite many years to train soldiers in combat situations. Now, virtual reality has been used for over 30 years in education by these very high-end institutions such as military and government agencies. They would not still be continuing to use virtual reality unless it was proven that it is having a very good beneficial outcome on what they're trying to teach their cadets or trying to teach their astronauts. So why use education today in your own education? So maybe you're from school, maybe you're from a university, maybe you're from a technical college somewhere, and you're looking at education and seeing what ways can we implement this. Well, there's a few different reasons. First of all, the cost has really come down quite substantially. So again, virtual reality has been used over the past 30 and 40 years in education, but it was hugely, hugely expensive. And that's why you would have only seen government agencies using it or very high-end training institutions using VR. So back in the past, if you have a look behind me, so that NASA headset, as an example, cost over $100,000. And then to run the simulation itself, you would have needed nearly a supercomputer back in the 80s. And even at that, you wouldn't have got a very high-quality experience. A lot of the simulations would have been wireframed, very low frame rates as well, where the screen might only refresh by maybe 20 frames a second or 25 frames a second. And it was a tough experience, especially if you're trying to roll it out to consumers. And we did see this in the 90s as well, where VR was still quite expensive, but the end user experience still wasn't great, and it made quite a few people feel dizzy because of the tracking issues and the low frame rates. Today, there's very, very powerful standalone headsets that you can get today, such as the Oculus Quest and the Vive Focus Plus. These devices are less than the price of an iPad. Also, they give a very good end-user experience. I myself, right now, I'm standing in a room in Ireland, and I'm wearing a Vive Focus Plus, and I'm getting a very, very good end-user experience. As I move around in my real world, my body or my avatar is moving in the virtual world, and as I wave my hands, you can see my hands are waving on my avatar. So we're translating all my movement and my presence to everybody else. And actually, because we're in this virtual auditorium, I feel like I'm literally just a few feet away from you. And this is something that we just cannot do on video-based platforms. If we were having this conference on video, you would literally just watch my face or my head on a screen, and that's it. And that's as much interaction as we would get. Whereas later today, I can go and I'm going to have conversations with some of you, one-on-one conversations. And again, this is something that we can do in VR, and something that if you're providing education, especially distance education in this COVID-19 world, you can have a virtual classroom. You can have your classmates come in from all over the world, and you can sit down and have a classroom type experience where people can interact with each other. You can draw on the whiteboard. You can stream in media on screens, just as I am, and it can be pretty much as close to a real classroom experience as anybody can get. So, why do I think VR is going to have a big role very, very soon in virtual reality, in education? So I remember, I'm old enough to remember back in the mid-80s when computers were starting to be used in schools. Now, computer technology is a lot older than the 80s. There was computers in the 70s and some computers in the 60s. But again, on the same kind of trajectory, the computers were so large in the 60s and so expensive, nobody could afford them. And then in the 70s, they started to become smaller and smaller, still quite expensive and quite difficult to use. But in the 80s, we really started to see computers that were aimed at the consumer market, where you could have a computer in your house, where you could use it for typing up books if you want to. You could use it for playing video games, and you can use it for some other productive tasks. This is where we really start to see the birth of computers. Now, virtual reality is the very same way. We're now only starting to see really consumer-friendly products that people can use on a daily basis. And back in the 80s as well, when the computers came into schools first, a lot of the educators were very afraid to use them. So people are afraid of change, and I can understand that. But when the computers came into schools, it might have been only maybe one or two teachers who were enthusiastic to use those computers. And they did see the future. Now, we're starting to see this in education today, where the kids of the 80s are now the teachers of today, who are in prominent places of power in many of these universities and colleges, and they're more willing to adapt to new technologies and new techniques. And this is why I feel virtual reality is just on the forefront, or just on the cliff edge of actually wider adoption. And I feel wider adoption will only happen when we start seeing VR used on a daily basis in education and in enterprise, the same way as computers started in enterprise and then it came to education, and then everybody is using computers today. So what are some of the benefits of using virtual reality for education? So there's quite a lot of things you can do in VR that are very, very unique. As an example, you can bring your students on a journey to the moon, as an example, on a field trip, whereas you can't do that in the real world. My own company built a program called Apollo 11 VR, where you become Neil Armstrong. You get to sit on top of a Saturn V rocket. You get to go to space. You get to feel what it's like to be an astronaut, to be Neil Armstrong, and you get to walk on the moon. This is something that just simply cannot happen on any other traditional forms of media. And it's a very, very emotive experience. And it's one of the things that my company really want to get out there, is that we're trying to bring emotion into education. So it's like when you watch movies, you only remember the movies that make you laugh or make you cry because you've had an emotional response to it, and that stays with you a lot longer. We need to do this in education as well. We need to really engage with students. We really need to get them emotionally involved in their education, and going and seeing history through the eyes of those who lived through it really is something that we're very passionate about here at VR Education. Some other benefits of VR as well is that there's great companies out there like Labster VR, as an example, where you can have a whole virtual laboratory with millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment, and you can do any experiment that you want, even if it's a dangerous experiment, in the safety of virtual reality. Now, there's many schools out there that can't afford really good, solid labs where they can do it all in virtual reality at a fraction of the cost. Also, because it is virtual reality, you can do some very, very unique things. You can bring in models, you can bring in objects. So as an example, if I was talking about dinosaurs, I can simply bring in a dinosaur and I can put it on the ground. So I'm just going to make him a bit small. So here you can see my friend. He's a big T-Rex. He's quite cool. Again, this is something that if you're trying to do this in the real world, you'll have maybe little plastic models that are maybe just a foot big. And you can be pointed at him. Whereas here we can actually see the scale of an object right up close. And in this case, this is a friendly T-Rex. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of him. And everything can be done instantly. So there's a very good book I'd like to talk about for a moment. So there's a book called Ready Player One. Some of you might have heard the name in the past. There was a movie created about this book a couple of years ago by Steven Spielberg, and it's a fantastic movie. It's very good to watch, and it's got lots of 80s and 90s references in it. However, what the movie did miss out is in the first 30% of the book, they talk almost exclusively about how education works in virtual reality. And it's on about kids who attend these virtual universities and virtual schools, how they go to virtual classrooms, how they have virtual friends in these virtual schools. And pretty much it's like a real high school. However, everything is inside virtual reality, and they can go off on field trips and tournaments, and they play sports. Now, it's a very, very good and interesting book, and I recommend to read it. Now, from reading that book, what my company has built is the Engage platform, and this is what we're inside today. So I'm in Ireland, inside the Engage platform, in this virtual auditorium, and we've audience members here from all over the world, and we feel like we're within a few feet of each other. We also have classroom environments inside the Engage platform where you can hold a class inside the platform. You can draw on the blackboard. You can bring in PowerPoints like I am now. You can bring in 3D models. And you can also create and share content. So inside Engage, we have a recording feature. If you click on record, it will record everything you do and say. It'll also record all your movement, and it will record any objects that you bring into the environment. And in fact, this is a recording of me giving you a presentation. I recorded this 2 days before this presentation is actually happening. And I'm really sitting in the audience here somewhere, and I will be talking to many of you later. It's very, very easy and intuitive to create content. And really, we built the Engage platform for a couple of different reasons. So myself and my own history, I'm dyslexic. I struggled very much in school, especially when it came to exam time. Now, being in school in Ireland, when I went to my classes, I was assigned teachers. I didn't pick my teachers. I was just assigned teachers, and that's who I had to go with. And some subjects I'm very, very good at. I'm very good at history and maths as an example, but I'm very poor at some other subjects. And it's not that my educators were poor educators. It's that I responded better to some educators than others, where some educators were very visual, and I responded very well, where some other educators were very text-heavy or text-based. And again, it's not that they were bad educators. I just responded better to some educators than others. So one of the core things that we're trying to do on the Engage platform is we're trying to turn educators into rock stars, where I see a future very, very soon where students, especially stay-at-home students, can log into a virtual reality platform and pick and choose their educators. So imagine a world where you could do physics in MIT in the morning and then English literature in Oxford University in the afternoon, with the top professors in the world. And that's something that we're trying to achieve on the Engage platform. And it is something that we're starting to see now, where we do have a whole series lecture from Oxford University on the platform, and many other very, very talented educators from around the world, all using the Engage platform to provide remote training. And I see that they will be a specialist. They will be specialist virtual universities where you will log into Engage and you will see, okay, MIT is the specialist tech engineering for the global region for educators. And I think that's something that's going to come very, very soon in the future. Another core reason why we've built the Engage platform really is we want to open up education as well to the wider masses. Education, quality education, especially at third level, is really now starting to become the pursuit of the rich and wealthy. If you wanted a 4-year education in the United States from any of the top universities or colleges, you're looking at $200,000 to $300,000 of student debt by the time you're finished. This just simply is not affordable to the vast majority of people, and I fully believe that there is kids alive today who are every bit as smart as Einstein or any of the top scientists around the world who have never had the opportunity, and these kids are flipping burgers in McDonald's or Burger King somewhere because they've never had the opportunities of maybe some of their richer peers. This just simply is unacceptable in my view, and really we want to open up education. So we see a world where these kids can attend virtual universities and colleges with the top professors from around the world inside a virtual space. And I see this happening very, very soon. Simply the way things are working at the moment, they really, really are starting to break down. We're seeing huge social divides in class, in in religion, in race, and this is all barriers that just simply don't happen inside virtual platforms. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to show you a quick trailer of the Engage platform. So this is just a short trailer.
We all experience the world in unique ways. Through our senses, we gather information and build cognitive process to understand concepts. This is how we learn. But what if we could push these boundaries past our physical world? What if you could communicate with anyone in the world, yet feel like you were in the same room? If you could meet and learn from teammates globally, sharing media and ideas, or jump into a simulated training.
But the real test is being able to do the right thing in a stressful situation.
To gain a deeper understanding of the task at hand.
And just squeezing the trigger to squeeze the bag.
You have ventilated the baby, and now it's time to reassess.
Please fasten your seatbelt, sir.
Creating real-world scenarios, improving employee knowledge and skills.
Exactly, planted another tree. And this time we put it up the top.
Imagine if quality education was accessible to all, regardless of geographical location.
Large hazard and increase the risk to these big cities.
What if no field trip is too far or impossible? A world of immersive experiences. Engage, communicate, teach, learn.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. So as you can see, a virtual platform can do many, many different things. Not only can it provide lecture style content, it can also do full simulated training. And using the Engage platform a couple of years ago, we met inside Engage the founder of Pixar, a guy called Lauren Carpenter. This guy is a fantastic advocate for new technologies. We met him inside Engage, we gave him a tour of the system, and we asked him, would he be able to teach a class remotely in London? And he said, yes, sure, of course, I'd love to give a presentation. So we set up a class in London where we set up 30 VR headsets provided by HTC Vive. And then Lauren Carpenter, he was all the way over in California. He beamed in then remotely using the Engage platform, and he talked all about the foundations of Pixar, how he created some of the very early computer graphics programs back in the day, and all about his journey as a business person. And it was a fantastic hour and a half lecture that the students in London received that they would have never had the opportunity to do so. So this is just their reaction.
It was almost unreal because you literally feel like you're in that space. You don't feel like anything else bar that is around you. It's just utterly surreal.
We were in Mars in the simulation, and it's like if you were in the planet, you can feel everything, you can hear everything, and it's really amazing. It's an amazing experience.
It was a really great experience. It was so fun to just go around to different parts of the universe, like on the moon or on Mars, and find all the little cool things we had to do.
Yeah, it was amazing. We got to learn from world leaders on technology. So we got people from Pixar. It was mind-blowing.
So that was just some of their reactions. And as you can hear, we have some very engaged children. On the video behind me, this is an example of one of the Oxford University lectures. So because it is virtual reality, again, we can bring people to any location. And this guy is actually talking inside the Bodleian Library, which is a very, very famous library in Oxford University. It might be something akin to when you're watching any of the Harry Potter movies, when they're in some of those large halls. It looks very, very similar to that. So the lecture series that we have on Engage, which you can try out today, they're freely available on the menu system, is we have a series of 12 lectures on all different topics. We have stuff about cancer research, which this one is talking about. We've ones about medieval manuscripts. We've another one about tigers. They're on a huge range of different subjects, and they're all recorded in real time. So what happens is, when you're inside Engage and you're moving and talking with our recording system, all your avatar's movements, everything that you talk about, any of the objects are all recorded. So a 20-minute lecture or a 40-minute, say, class as an example, can be recorded in real time and then played back again. So if you're a really competent presenter, you can produce content very quick, very easily at literally no cost. Whereas if you had to go to a content producer or a studio to make any immersive content, it would cost you many, many thousands of dollars. And we're hoping that educators will use this platform more and more to create their content. And really, what we're trying to achieve with especially distance learning in education is that the educators themselves, they can pre-record all their classes and they can say to their students who are dotted everywhere that, okay, you're to do class 1, 2, and 3. And it's a pre-recorded class, and then the educator doesn't have to provide that class directly. They can log in later and they'll have more one-to-one time with the students. And really, there has been, I remember back many years ago where the term was, look, no student left behind. But really, when you're in a classroom of maybe 30 students or 40 students, you're always teaching at the middle ground. So you have some very advanced students and they're really willing to learn and they want to get on to the next bit and next bit. And you're kind of keep them back because you're trying to do a happy medium. And then you have some students in your class who are really struggling to keep up. Whereas we feel with virtual reality, if you pre-record your classes, for those students who are more advanced, they can go ahead a little bit further using the classes that you've already pre-recorded, and then you have more one-to-one time. Maybe the students who are struggling a little bit, but you have more one-to-one time in general with all your students. And really, distance learning and stay-at-home learning is something that we feel strongly that this platform is perfectly suited for. So not only can a virtual platform be used for virtual lectures, it can also be used for full recreations. Now, this next video is of a World War II veteran in the UK. So the BBC came to ourselves about 2.5 years ago, and they asked us to create a project. And this project was to recreate a bombing run on Berlin back in 1943. It was a very famous piece of audio, and in the audio, it was recorded inside a Lancaster bomber. And it was the first time that an audio recording survived in a Lancaster bomber run, because back then they were record players. They looked like a record player, and it was a cutting disc. And if the cutting disc got jolted at all, it would ruin the recording. But this one actually survived and came back. So we recreated the full mission from the Lancaster bomber. And this is actually one of the air crew checking it out and giving his reaction.
And I had that feeling, I had that tickling stomach.
Hello, skipper. Hello, navigator.
I did feel I was on an operation.
There goes the flag again.
We had the master searchlight. How frightening those were.
The thing we can see now is a wall of searchlights.
When you've done a lot of operations, I just wondered how I was going to get through all that. I was calm, quite calm, but it came home to me. I was thinking very much about it. Very good. It was very, very good. It really is. It's you felt as though you were in it, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's excellent. I think it's brilliant.
So you can see the raw emotion that was coming out of Jeffrey. He really relived that mission. And again, just to go back to the emotional aspects of education, if you can get any type of reaction at all from anybody, they will really retain and remember that experience. And again, like when we're doing, say, engineering lessons inside the Engage platform, where you're giving people like bridge kits, to build a bridge over a canyon, as an example, they do remember that and they do retain that. And it's really like the emotional aspect of education is hugely important, because you need to have engaged learners. They need to be enjoying their lessons. They need to be stimulated. And quite often, for many students, simply throwing reams of text at them and images, a lot of people don't engage with that. They can be very visual learners. Also, not only just for education in general, but also it could be used for training aspects. And KFC are one of those companies that jumped on board very quickly, where they're training many workers on how to cook chicken. And they've used a virtual reality application where they've turned it into a scary type game, an escape room game. So really, they're getting the emotion of maybe fear in getting through the tasks, and then they're actually learning as they're playing this horror game. So I'm just going to play a trailer about that.
Tell me, do you like pain? Do you learn how to make my chicken right? You will not be allowed to leave. You're doing a good job there, trainee. If it's too wet, the bread won't stick, you see.
Rinsing complete.
My robot servant is going to show you how to bread the chicken. Watch this idiotic robot show you the proper technique. 5 potatoes, 8 potatoes, 7.
Breading complete. Step 4. Racking.
Make a song. You do it by placing the chicken exactly where the music box tells you. Do you remember all the steps of the hard way? Now, you may leave this delicious prison and send.
Okay, so that was a video of how they're using virtual reality to train their new employees, and it's certainly a strange welcome to an organization, but it's great to see that virtual reality is being used more and more in industry. Now, there was a project that we worked on with Oxford University a couple of years back, and it was a medical training application. Now, in the video behind me, you can see this is me in the real world, and I'm just walking around in a space. But then you'll see that we're going to go into a medical training example. So the people we worked with at Oxford University, they have a group called the Life Project. And what they do is that they fly over to Africa a couple of times a year, and with a very lifelike baby doll. And they train students, medical students, on how to resuscitate that baby with very limited equipment. Because there's quite a lot of babies that died during childbirth in lots of these very under-equipped hospitals in Africa, simply because they don't have the facilities if anything happens. So what they have done in the past is they'd have a group of maybe 20 or 30 students in a small room, and they'd all stand around this doll, and each student would practice on the doll by putting a mask on the doll and doing the procedures for resuscitation. Now, what they found was that the students, they found it very hard to take it super serious, because you're standing with obviously all your peers and you're working on a doll, and it does look like a doll. And they came to us and said, look, can we help in any way? So what we created was a virtual hospital, as you can see it here, and a virtual baby. Now that baby is getting bluer and bluer the longer you take to resuscitate the baby. And we have a virtual doctor that talks you through the steps on how to resuscitate the baby in the correct manner. And it's a very, very stressful situation. You only have 3 minutes to save the baby, and you have to go through each of the steps. Here you can see me rubbing the baby's back, and here you can see me in the real world. I'm actually just standing in front of empty space. And what they found was that using the virtual simulation, because the baby reacts in a very, very natural way, that it really induced a lot of stress in the students, and they retained what they're learning a lot more. Not only can you do this virtually with a virtual doctor, but the professors themselves can log in remotely in Oxford and beam directly to the students. They have HTC kindly donated VR equipment to the training centre. So they can provide this training on a monthly basis, whereas before they'd only go over maybe twice a year. So not only can they teach more students live, the students can also go in and do the virtual training with the virtual doctor as well. I'll actually just turn this up and we'll see, can I save the baby?
And the baby is still not breathing, moving, or crying. You will need to ventilate the baby. Choose the correct size mask and position it correctly on the baby's face.
So you see me grabbing the smaller mask
over here.
So I'm physically walking over, grabbing it. So you can do very simulated tasks.
Good. The baby needs to be ventilated now. Select the best technique from the options you can see.
So I've done this quite a few times already. I know it's the first one, which is 30 to 50 breaths per minute.
Now practice ventilating the baby with one hand holding the mask in place and the other squeezing the bag. Try to keep the correct rate of 30 to 50 breaths per minute and watch the chest rise with each breath. If the chest doesn't rise, you haven't successfully given a breath.
So you can see I'm actually going through all the steps. So you can see. Okay. So is there any proven results? Does virtual reality work? Yes, it looks fantastic, and all this stuff looks very, very fun and interesting, but does it actually work? So you can see behind me, this was an A/B test that was completed in China, where they taught half the students in virtual reality and the other half in traditional method. And when they gave a test, an immediate test, they discovered that the students who were trained in virtual reality, they had a 27% better test result. However, what was very interesting is they went back and retested the kids 6 weeks later, and they actually found that the kids who were taught originally in virtual reality in their lesson, they found that they had 32% of them had better test results. So they retained that knowledge a lot more. So not only is it, okay, you're going to get an immediate test and you're going to have better test results because they're more attentive, they've actually discovered that it sticks with them a lot longer. When they brought virtual reality training into mine safety training in South Africa, they discovered that almost every worker preferred the virtual way of training than the traditional method, whereas traditionally what they would have done is they would have done role play acting and in a room, and they would have went through the procedures of how to put out fires and put on your masks. However, when they trained in virtual reality, it was a very realistic simulation where we could cause cave collapse, and we could cause fires, and they could really, again, in really making the workers really stress during their training. And what they discovered is after they introduced virtual reality for safety training, it reduced workplace accidents by up to 43% after a 6-month period. Now, virtual reality is also being used by the military for therapy. So there's quite a lot of military personnel around the world that when they return from war zones, they would have a stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, where maybe they were traveling down a road and an IED went off and it caused them pretty much what is commonly known as shell shock. And what they're doing is with virtual reality, they're doing immersion training where they make them relive that scenario over and over again. And it actually has a very drastic effect where it does really cure a lot of ailments of a lot of these soldiers, and they really do come out the other end pretty much cured after quite a few sessions. Also, as well, with going back to the educational aspects, with virtual reality, there's a partner that we work very closely with called Victory XR. I recommend you check them out. They have lots of pre-made lessons, a lot of them based on the American education system. And what they have is they have a whole dissection program where they have all different animals that you can dissect in virtual reality. So no need to go out and harm any real animals. You can dissect frogs, or you can dissect hearts, or you can even look inside the human body. And they're a very, very good use case for virtual reality in standard education today. So finally, I was talking about previously a project that we made some time back called Apollo 11, where you become Neil Armstrong. Now, again, going back to the emotion part of it, when you can relive history, you can really instill a sense of awe and wonder in your students. And Apollo 11 was one of those very first early projects that really got a lot of traction and a lot of notice. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to play a short trailer for Apollo 11, and then I'm going to follow that then with actually a student's reaction. And I think the students can say really what virtual reality means to him a lot more than I could even put into words.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Okay, so that was the trailer, and as the trailer was playing, I actually dropped down 2 objects. So here we could see an Apollo astronaut and also a lunar rover. So I'm just going to play this this kid's reaction.
So, yeah, that was the end of the demo. I'm recording this end part because unfortunately my webcam stopped at the end there. But I'm just gonna pretty much say what I said there, and that this was absolutely amazing. Like, this was just incredible. It makes me so happy that my Rift right here can make me feel such powerful emotions from something that wasn't even real. Can you imagine, like, if you were back in high school and you were in your science class and you started talking about the Apollo missions, and instead of going through a long lecture about it, they gave you a VR headset and put you in this? How much more is that able to teach you than just someone sitting up there talking about it? Not that it's a bad thing, but this is just so much more powerful. I felt like I was in that space shuttle with Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins. That was... I'm not crying, but I certainly feel like I want to, because that's all I can say about it. It was just amazing. And these guys did a fantastic job on it. And I'm definitely gonna be backing them a lot now, because this needs to happen. This needs to become a thing. Virtual reality education, things like this need to become a thing.
So as you can hear, he was quite emotional after his Apollo experience, and actually I had to cut him off a little bit. So he was actually talking for about 15 minutes all about his experience, and he's not the only one that has talked about virtual reality experience really transforming their outlook on education. There's so many applications out there currently, and we're very excited every day that we come into work and we see how virtual reality and especially our Engage platform, how it's been used on a day-to-day basis. And really, it's been used in so many different applications, stuff that we've never even dreamed about. We have, say, a partner who's using virtual reality for teaching vision impaired. And you might think, sure, virtual reality is a very vision-heavy experience. Yes, it is, but because you have spatial audio, when you're closer to someone, they sound closer to you. If you're further away, they sound further away. Really, the vision impaired people find that using virtual reality, because of the spatial audio aspects, they get a really kind of real sense of the world in a virtual space. So it's surprising to us every day, and we're so grateful to be working in this industry. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to me over the last 30 minutes, and I am going to be available for questions straight after this. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.